I've been with you guys 2 years. Everybody knows I'm the dumbest. I can't handle calculus. These guys have a better chance of making the AP test without me.
We all grow up with different experiences, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, customs, cultures, upbringings, and education. Education is a vital piece of a person's upbringing, especially in the United States. The area one has grown up in is nice, crime-free, protected, and inexpensive. These people are more often than not able to have the privilege of experiencing a good education. A good education in the sense that teachers in these higher income areas teach their students like they care about their future. Those who grow up in low-income neighborhoods with high crime rates in a minority-based area in the ghetto or parts of town have experienced an education system that has nearly failed them. This is a significant issue to be aware of because of the inequalities that occur between different races, class, ethnicities, and regions. People who live in higher income neighborhoods tend to have an overall better experience and higher than above average education and understanding of various academic topics at a younger age. Whereas in low-income Latino communities, there's a slower pace at which these children learn. This is not only a contemporary issue, but many events have led up to this sort of educational segregation, and it could date as far back as 1931. In 1931, there was an occurrence known as the Lemon Grove Incident during this time period. 1931 and the early 1900s was a period where schools were segregated and allowed to have Mexican schools to Americanize these children as well as separate them from white Anglo-American kids. Lemon Grove Grammar School was a school with both Mexican and white children, but during these socially and economically difficult times, it was decided that Lemon Grove Grammar School be segregated and the Mexican children be sent off to a different school, the Olive Street School. This school was located across the train tracks that signified the divide between Anglos and Mexicans and their education that they were receiving. The day that these children were sent to this new school, specifically made for Mexican children, was a day that infuriated both the children and the children's parents. They started a huelga or a strike against this new school in order to have their voices heard and to have their children receive the same education as these white children did in their old school. In Anibal Quijano's Coloniality of Power, Eurocentrism, and Latin America, the divide between race and national identity is predominant in his work. Quijano was a Peruvian sociologist who dedicated his research and expertise in coloniality of knowledge and power. Quijano discusses the social divide between indigenous people in Mexico and the Spanish who created what we call mestizos. Mestizos are people of mixed race or ethnicity, more specifically a mix of Spanish or European and indigenous blood. They were given this label and identity. The Spanish created this divide in order to have more power or control over indigenous people. Still, the only difference is that mestizos had a different treatment due to their mixed origins. It could be as simple as looking a certain way, white and or not indigenous. They would be able to do things more freely. Today, public schools are not segregated, but they are divided due to household income levels, which is often linked to issues of having divide between races and ethnicities. Education in higher income communities and low income communities have very big differences that could also be the result of underpaying teachers and staff in low-income schools. When staff is underpaid, unfortunately, can result in not giving proper care or attention to students' needs, as well as not being able to teach what is necessary for those students' success in that grade level. As a result of being underpaid, there are strikes and protests against school boards, like the recent events in Los Angeles Unified School District. This strike shut down many schools in Los Angeles Unified School District back in March earlier this year, which ultimately affected the education of students. This would be a rare occurrence in higher income districts where teachers are not underpaid and schools are not underfunded. Up until I was 6 or 7 years old, I had lived in a city with predominantly white middle class people. Looking back, I had not realized it then, but my education in that town was very different from that of when I moved into a low-income Latino community. Over in the higher income town, I was an average student, but then when I moved into the lower income district, I was perceived as an above average student. Growing up as a Latina Mexican American girl, it had never really fazed me up until I realized that my education was different from the school district that was a couple towns over. Starting the second grade, I moved into what people on the outside would describe as a sketchy, low-income ghetto neighborhood, which to me felt normal and had a sense of familiarity since my grandparents lived there and my mom grew up in this town. But to others on the outside, they saw a scary neighborhood with Latino kids and teenagers who had little to no future. At some point in my life, I realized that they even saw my education at risk. My tia once warned me about going to a middle school that was half a block away from my home at the time. She said that it was ghetto, old, and the teachers there did not care about the students because the students were bad kids who would get into fights, vandalize property, and even do drugs. I hesitated and was nervous to go, but I thought she was exaggerating about these kids. I wanted to go to this middle school because of the video and photo program that they offered at this school. I ended up attending this school, and sure enough, there was some truth to what my tia had told me. To an extent, there were a few bad kids here and there doing the stuff she had warned me about, but I had kept my focus over those 3 years to ensure that I did not follow the wrong path. Moving forward in my education through high school, I had continued to hear negative things about the school I would be attending. I had only chosen to go to the school because of their dance team that I wanted to take part of. One aspect about these public schools in predominantly Latino communities that I had noticed in high school was the way that teachers were not very involved with the students' needs. I had even had teachers deny my questions in class and tell me to go figure it out myself rather than taking the time to help me learn and understand a concept thoroughly. There were various occurrences where many of my teachers would have us do worksheets that would not intrigue the students at all, or just play videos instead of lecturing or having an activity that the students actually enjoyed. I was talking to my sister about this topic, and one aspect she recalls being different is parent involvement in their students' education, like going to events for both the students and families. Another being the access to after-school programs, which is more common in lower-income districts, as well as having free transportation, reduced prices for lunch, or even free lunch. When discussing this topic with one of my friends, Jerixa Olea, from middle school, she mentioned how she also felt as if she had lower education when she moved to a lower-income elementary school, and had almost identical experience as I did, with having already learned many concepts at her old elementary school that many of the students just now learning at her new grade level. We went to different high schools. She claims that in high school that she had experienced racism. This was due to her attending a predominantly white high school, and she felt as if she was looked down upon because of her Mexican American background, her economic status, and simply because she looked different from the majority of white students. This experience has allowed her to realize that the education system in low-income Latino communities is very different than the experience of a predominantly white school. In Chapter 2 of We Make the Road by Walking, by Myles, Horton, and Paulo Freire, who both have a background in education and social change or socialism, discuss in the chapter titled Formative Years in the way in which education in Latin America has yet to help students succeed. Reading books has been the main source of education and learning of the people being interviewed by Myles and Freire. Being underprivileged in this situation has not allowed students in Latin America to fully get the education that they would want and deserve. Much like in contemporary times, if students are genuinely interested in a topic, they could figure out more information on their own, possibly by using books, but the internet seems to have more of an impact on children this day and age. To sum everything up, education in predominantly low-income Latino communities is severely different from a good, well-operated, high-income school with majority white students. We have seen throughout history up to today's issues that public education in these Latino communities has always been segregated, with or without laws in place, and separated by income levels, socioeconomic status, race, and whether or not we like it, these schools will have the separation and distinction based off of these factors. As early as the colonization of Mexico and the United States, we have seen Eurocentric values, features, and customs being praised and preferred in not only education, but in everyday life activities. Many strikes and protests have occurred, such as the Lemon Grove Grammar School incident and the staff in Los Angeles Unified School District, in order to attempt to bring students their justice in their education that should have been equal to their white, higher status peers. Quijano and both Myles and Freire have recognized in their works Coloniality of Power, Eurocentrism in Latin America, and in We Make the Road by Walking, the various injustices that have taken place that has led up to the educational systems that we see today in the United States. In my experience and the experiences of people I grew up with, have firsthand experience of both these public educational systems that have failed many of our peers. There are countless and unjust and flat-out racist occurrences where there is not the same opportunity that was given to Latino children in these schools, which has ultimately caused a divide between the equal education that public schools in the United States claim to give its students.